Hi, my name's Keith Cooper from Northlight Images, and in this short video I'm going to look at making a panoramic black and white print on fine art paper using the Canon PRO-300. Now the PRO-300 I reviewed a while ago. It's an excellent printer. It's a pigment ink based printer, and that's why it's one I would choose to use for black and white prints. Counterintuitively perhaps, black and white printing is more difficult for a printer to do well than it is for colour. It's just by the way how we see pictures and how we see colour tints and things. Pigment inks give you prints which look more consistently neutral black and white, or you can tone them if you wish. But anyway, I'm going to use a roll paper in this. Now, this printer doesn't have a roll paper support. What's different from other prints I've shown in videos is this one's going in via the rear slot at the back. Normally I load fine art sheets of paper into the top feed here. They go through, they come out. I would note in the printer settings that some Canon media types don't load through the top here or that need loading through the back. So a lot of the profiles that I produced when testing for sheets that went in the top here used the HAP heavyweight art paper media setting. Now, if you go for the fine art smooth setting, which I'm going to use for this particular paper here, you'll find that you can't load it in here. It has to go via the back. Now, it's somewhat arbitrary, the choices. I've covered this in the written review and also some of the other videos that I've done. But the paper I'm using here is from a 13-inch roll from Fotospeed in the UK. And it's high white smooth light. It's a 215 gram paper, so it's a relatively light paper for an art paper, but still very nice finish, smooth finish on it, and it's a bright white. Now there are lots of other art papers like this, but not often available in 13-inch roll. Fotospeed have got quite a few that arrange that. If you're in other areas of the world, you may need to have a hunt round and contact paper suppliers to see what they've got in 13-inch. Because quite often all you'll find is basic glossy paper in 13-inch, whereas I've got several types here for that. But I've cut a length of that off. Now, because there's no roll feed, you will get problems loading paper. So what I've done with this sheet here, yesterday I cut this sheet, put it on the floor, used a rotary trimmer to make sure the edges are perfectly straight and square onto the paper. That makes a difference in the feeding. And this sheet I then laid out on soft surface with a couple of books on it. As you can see, it's still got curl. It will keep curl for quite some time. The bit you need to be careful of is the leading edge of the printer, of the paper. If the leading edge is not square, if it isn't inserted properly, the whole print will come out on the skew. But anyway, I've pushed this into the socket. I'm using the slot at the back here, folds down. I've put it in, takes a bit of jiggling about to get the paper to line up properly. And I've got that in there. Now on the settings here, I've set the paper type to fine art smooth, and I've set the size, the paper size here, to others. It's been detected when I put the paper in, so it knows what paper is. That will just make the process easier. I prefer to set the paper here almost automatically as a sort of double reminder to make sure I've got things. But anyway, that's the paper set up. So I've just gently curled it here. This is a metre long strip of paper, so you need to be a bit careful with it. Clean hands when you're handling paper like this. It does not take smudges and marks well when it goes through. But anyway, to the computer, and I will print this. Now I'm printing this in the Canon Print Layout software, which works very well with this. I've selected the printer. I've set Premium Fine Art Smooth. Now that's the media type for the back slot there. I've set the paper size, and I've actually set a custom paper size Now this one I've called largest 13" because it's the maximum dimensions the printer can handle. So it's 330mm by 990mm. So you can get up just short of a metre, so about 39 inches long a piece of paper. Manual feed tray. I've set the print quality to highest because it does make a little bit of a difference on a paper like this. It does mean the print won't be terribly fast, but the important bit with this image, which is a view of the canal here in Leicester, some very old buildings on the other side, an industrial complex. It's all being redeveloped now. This was taken a couple of years ago, and I think that's probably houses now, or maybe industrial units, who knows. I've not been up there for a while. I've set black and white photo. Now the black and white photo mode works very well on the Pro-300. I've got an article and a video that look specifically at black and white printing. But anyway, we don't need to worry about printer profiles or anything like that when we're doing this. For the black and white mode, you set that, you set the correct media type, and then I'll just press print. Now the laptop's not terribly quick one, so it will take a few minutes to process this file. Now the file itself is a stitched image, quite a few shots put together, just a panoramic then stitched together. It's about a 3:1 aspect ratio, which fits the available size of paper you can have here quite well. And what I've done is I have upsampled the image to 600 pixels per inch. From, it should be about just over 300, but upsampled it to 600 using gigapixel AI. Now this is part of some stuff I've been experimenting with images with lots of fine detail on them. If you resample them, you get obviously a much bigger file, but if you're careful with your resampling, that extra detail that gets created in when you're doing the resampling actually forms a type of sharpening. Now, it's not directly relevant to this, but I just thought I'd mention because people want to know how I've actually done the pictures, you know, how I've worked them together. But anyway, we'll now just wait for this to come through. Printing will start from the manual feed tray. Load a sheet of paper, it's loaded, so you don't have to load it, you can wait until you're asked, and I'll just press the start print. I can feel the paper feeding there. This is almost a bit, remember, this is not a printer. The printer widths, the paper widths don't match. Well, that didn't work very well. And I found the reason. Although when I set the paper size, loaded here, set the paper size here, I have detect paper settings mismatch off, so it shouldn't detect any mismatch in paper settings. However, what I needed to do was to go into the advanced paper settings on the menu here, go through them all, and you'll find a list of media types, advanced settings for each media type. I went to the fine art smooth media setting, went down, looked at the detect paper width, and it was set for on. So although I've set the detect paper width off for the printer, it seems to have been locally overridden by the setting for that particular paper. So anyway, I've loaded the paper back again after its quick trip through the printer, which doesn't fortunately show any damage or any marks or anything. I wouldn't suggest doing this, but this is one of the reasons I get to experiment with printers, to find this sort of stuff out. So there we go, we've got detect paper width turned off. Now I'll try printing again. Say I'm quite happy leaving things going wrong in videos if it actually shows something that isn't obvious that you might need to take care of. I don't really worry about this is some sample paper I've got. Don't worry that much about wasting a sheet of paper. I'd hate to think somebody would follow this, do it, and lose a sheet of paper or damage a sheet of expensive paper, because this stuff's not necessarily cheap if you get the better, the really thick, better quality stuff. But anyway, let's see what's happening. The computer says it's sending the file. It's a big file, as I said, so we'll just have to wait for this. Well, the printer's woken up. Printing will start once again. Start print. Force of habit there, I've been using different printers with touch screens. We have to actually press a button. One thing when handling unusual size papers like this, keep an eye on them as the print goes through, because it's quite possible for them to flip out the back or to twist or something like that, and you don't want to put any strain on the paper going through. You want it to be a nice even process that goes through. Once a foot or two of print has come out, it will be just going straight through like that. The next problem then is to make sure you catch the print at the front to stop any problems there. Well, here comes the leading edge of the print, and yep, it's printing. Now, immediately I've noticed that the border is not quite even. Now, it means it's more on a wider border on one side than the other. That has almost certainly come from the custom paper size I've set. Is not exactly the same as the width of the paper. Now that doesn't matter, because for large prints like this they'd be matted anyway. So I would say if you're going to make prints this size, make sure you can you've got the card and the cutter to mat them, because it's not a trivial matter. But take them to a framer and they will do this stuff dead easy for you. Here comes the print. I can see that the border on this side is perhaps 5mm and it's 8-9mm on the other side. That's purely the paper width here. In fact, if I get my tape measure, yeah, I'll find that the paper width here is actually 334, whereas I specified 330. Might be a problem, might not be a problem. Something I've learnt for next time. But anyway, the main question here is, does the print look alright? And from what's coming out here, yeah, it looks fine. But then again, I know this printer well. It prints black and white prints very well. It has pigment inks, which makes a difference for black and white printing. And this paper is a very similar finish to the Canon white, smooth, fine art paper. It's a cotton rag paper, just a fine coat. It has some optical brightener in it, which makes it quite a bright image. Now, I tend to have two different types in my sort of standard papers for this, of these fine art papers. I tend to have two sorts. I tend to have a bright white and a natural white. The natural white doesn't have the whiteness in it. Now, it makes it slightly more archival. But the other thing is, when I'm looking at this, some images suit a brighter paper better than others. Just some do, some don't. That's a matter of taste. I've got an article and some video on choosing a set of papers. And what I would say, if you get a new printer like this, do not rush out and buy sample packs of loads of papers to try until you've got experience using the printer. Because basically, if I buy, for a brand new printer, 5 or 6 papers to try, I don't know what they're like. I don't know how the printer performs. So when I'm testing a printer, I always start out on a few known papers, and they're generally Canon papers for a printer like this, or if it's an Epson printer, be some Epson papers, just to get the hang of how it performs, and then I can decide which papers I like for the printer. Now, I'm using the paper guides at the back here. And one of the problems is roll paper like this wants to roll, and so it will flip out of these guides if you're not careful. And what it looks like is that they have drifted slightly, so I have a tiny bit of skew on the print. Now this is nothing to do with the printer, this is purely to do with me trying to do this in a way which I can actually show on the video rather than take proper care in setting it up. Doesn't matter, as I say, because I'm going to matte this, so it doesn't matter if there's a slight bit of skew. But it looks as if the image is slightly offset on the print. Now, if I was selling unmounted prints, that's a serious problem. So what I would say is practice with some smaller sheets of paper feeding in here rather than starting off producing something a metre long. As I say, I've got the luxury of having paper and ink to experiment with for these, so I would not recommend it if you're doing it for yourself. Take a bit more of a measured approach. I have found this with several printers like this where they don't directly support paper, long paper by having a roll attachment or anything. You can get a slight bit of skew in it. Now if you've got a big roller trimmer or something like that, and I've got a 6 foot roller trimmer that I can put this in and trim this up neat so that nobody would ever notice, that's fine. I would however prefer to get it right coming out of the print. So, you know, take care with it. It's still a great looking print. It's looking very good. I'm looking at some detail of some leaves here, and the sharpening's worked well, but be careful with it. Now the tonality of this print is working out very nice. It's what I see on the screen. The black and white mode for the driver works very well. I would always say test it on a known good test image. I have several black and white test images available for testing how black and white looks. But this paper is close enough to a Canon paper that it's coming out pretty good. And in particular, the deep shadow areas here, there's no sign of blocking of shadows on the image. It's the reflections look good in the water, the detail in the trees are there, the brighter bit. But I'll give the print a bit of a look over later. But no, it's coming out well. And there we are. There we have one, unfortunately slightly skewed, but the actual print itself looks great. Black and white print, produced on a fine art smooth paper, and there you go. Please do have a look at the other videos, and in particular the articles I've written, because there's generally a lot more detail in the articles. Subscribe to the channel if you find it useful, and if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask. But I'd say if there's one thing to learn from this is experiment on smaller bits of paper first. It was a bit optimistic for my first long print like this, going through the rear slot rather than the top slot. Done prints through the top slot before. The rear slot, be careful with lining up your paper. So hopefully this is of use to somebody. Thank you very much.